Stalker Horror Stories. Story 1 by Clara. I don't usually scare easily. I grew up in a big city. I've had my fair share of catcalls, uncomfortable stares, and awkward encounters. But I never thought any of it would lead to this. At 21, I was juggling a full class schedule and a part-time job at a late-night cafe near campus. It wasn't ideal, but I needed the money. Most nights, I didn't get off work until nearly 11, and by then, the buses had slowed to their hourly schedule. I'd wait at the shelter across from the cafe, headphones in, keeping to myself. The first time I noticed him, I didn't think much of it. A man, maybe late 30s, sitting at the far end of the bus shelter. Worn hoodie, jeans, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. He just sat there, his hands resting on his knees, his face tilted slightly down. I assumed he was waiting for the bus. Maybe a night shift worker like me. But then he was there again the next night. Same spot, same position, same silence. And again the night after that. He never looked directly at me, not that I could tell. But something about the way he sat, completely still, like he was holding his breath, made me uneasy. After the third night, I switched sides of the shelter, pretending to be on a call. But I felt it, his presence. Still, watching without watching. When I got home that night, I told myself it was coincidence. People take the same buses all the time. Maybe his shift ended when mine did. But on the fourth night, I did something different. I left the cafe 10 minutes early and waited inside the lobby instead of heading straight to the shelter. I could see it through the window. He was already there, sitting in the exact same spot, waiting. I watched him for several minutes. He didn't check his phone, didn't glance around, just sat, like he'd been waiting for me, not the bus. I didn't go out right away. I stayed inside until the bus pulled up, then bolted out at the last second, hopped on, and sat as close to the driver as I could. I didn't look to see if the man followed. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I told my roommate, Nina, about him, hoping she'd roll her eyes and say I was being paranoid. But instead, her brow furrowed. "That's creepy. Have you seen him get on the bus with you?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I haven't checked. I don't want to. Maybe take a different route for a while," she suggested. But I couldn't. It was the only bus that ran that late, and I needed it to get home. I started leaving work with my jacket hood up, my earbuds in with no music playing, just so I could hear everything. Sometimes I'd get to the shelter, and he wouldn't be there. I'd feel a flicker of relief, only for it to vanish when I spotted him across the street, or standing by the lamppost a few yards away, half shrouded in shadow, always watching. One night, I stayed behind at the cafe to clean a bit longer. My coworker Liam offered to walk me to the stop. I hesitated, didn't want to seem weak, but agreed. As we stepped out, I glanced toward the shelter. Empty. But as we walked closer, I saw him, standing in the alley next to the hardware store, just barely visible. He wasn't waiting for a bus. Liam didn't notice him. He joked about how the cold made the city feel like a horror movie. I forced a laugh. When the bus came, Liam waved goodbye. I got on. The man didn't move from the alley, but something told me he'd be there again. The next morning, I opened my mailbox before heading to class and found a note. No envelope, just a torn piece of paper, folded twice. I unfolded it with numb fingers. "Nice blue scarf. It brings out your eyes." I wore a blue scarf the night before. I hadn't posted a picture in it. I hadn't shown anyone. He'd been close enough to see me, to study my face. I dropped the note and backed away, my breath catching. My fingers trembled as I texted Nina, asking if she was home. I didn't tell her why. I didn't go to class that day. I didn't go to work, either. I stayed inside, blinds shut, lights off, checking the windows every 10 minutes. The bus stop was still visible from our second-floor apartment. He wasn't there, but that didn't mean he was gone. That night, Nina came home and asked what was going on. I showed her the note. She stared at it in silence, then whispered, "You need to tell someone." But I didn't. I don't even know why. Maybe because part of me thought it would stop, that he'd get bored, that maybe, just maybe, I'd misread the whole thing. But then the next note came. "I liked when you laughed with your friend. You don't do that when you're alone." This time, the paper was slipped under my door. He knew where I lived. I didn't tell Nina about that one. She'd push me to act, to go to the authorities. And I wasn't ready. Instead, I changed my routines. I started taking earlier buses, changing my shifts, walking different routes, pulling my hood down low. But no matter what I did, I'd see him. Sometimes in the distance, sometimes closer. Once, standing at the far end of the cafe's parking lot, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly like he was listening to something. Always silent, always there. And now, I've started to hear things. At night, when I'm lying in bed, I'll hear footsteps outside my window. Soft, deliberate. Once, I heard breathing, not my own, right outside my bedroom. I lay frozen for what felt like hours, the sound barely audible through the thin glass. I didn't look. I couldn't. And now, there's a new note. It's sitting on my desk right now. I found it on my pillow when I came home from class. The door was locked. Nothing else was touched. Just this note. I like how quiet you've become. It makes it easier. And I don't know what he means by that. But I know I haven't seen him in 3 days. And that's what scares me the most. I haven't told anyone about the last note. Not even Nina. I don't know why. Maybe it's shame. Maybe it's fear. Or maybe I'm starting to believe that saying something will just make it worse. Like if I acknowledge him out loud, he'll take it as a challenge. It's been 3 days since I found that note on my pillow. 3 nights of barely sleeping. I wedge a chair under the doorknob now. I leave the lights on. I don't care how paranoid it looks. I even started leaving my phone recording video when I leave the apartment, just pointed at the door, just in case. But so far, nothing. No movement. No sound. No new notes. Just silence. And I hate it. Because now, I'm not dealing with something I can see. It's become a presence, a shadow that follows me whether he's physically there or not. I don't take the bus anymore. I begged my manager to let me switch to the morning shift, and for once, he said yes. So I walk in daylight now, surrounded by strangers, but somehow feeling even more alone. And then today, I noticed something new. A young guy came into the cafe during my shift. Looked like a student. Clean hoodie, backpack slung over one shoulder. He didn't order anything. He just walked in, glanced around the room, and looked straight at me. He didn't smile. Didn't say a word. Just looked. And then walked back out. It could have meant nothing. Could have been a random moment. But my stomach dropped when I recognized the backpack. I'd seen it once before. At the bus shelter. Resting between the man's feet. The rest of my shift passed in a haze. I was so rattled, I messed up 3 drink orders and dropped a tray of mugs. And when I got home, I noticed something else. The recording on my phone, normally silent, just hours of static noise and shadows, had a glitch. About 2 hours in, the screen flickered. Just once. The kind of flicker that happens when a light turns on or off. I watched the rest of the video with a knot in my stomach. Nothing else happened. No movement, no sound. But I couldn't stop thinking about that flicker. Because I didn't leave any lights on in the apartment today. I checked every room, every switch, and that's when I saw it. A smudge on the inside of my bedroom window. A fingerprint. On the inside. That window's always locked. Always. My breath caught. I backed out of the room slowly, as if turning my back would invite something to happen. I don't know how he got in. I don't know when he got in. But I know now, with a sick certainty. He never really left. I stood in the hallway, staring at my bedroom door. The fingerprint on the inside of the window wasn't a smudge from me. I never opened that window. Never even touched the glass. And yet, there it was. Perfectly placed. Almost deliberate. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I held my breath, straining to hear anything. A creak. A breath. Anything. But there was nothing. Just that hollow, low buzz of silence that made everything feel wrong. I walked backward down the hallway, my eyes locked on the bedroom. I didn't want to go in, but I knew I had to. So I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a metal desk lamp, and held it tight as I stepped inside. The room looked normal at first. Everything where I left it. Bed made. Closet doors shut. Blinds drawn. But the air felt different. Stale. Like someone had just been there, and the room hadn't fully recovered. I approached the window slowly. The fingerprint was still there, smudged slightly now from the humidity. I looked closer, and saw another one. Lower, near the base of the glass. Like someone had crouched down, maybe watched me sleep. I backed away. My mouth was dry, my throat tight. I turned to the closet. Stared at it. The doors were closed. I stood there for a full minute before I moved. Then I reached out, took a deep breath, and yanked the door open. Empty. At least, it looked empty. I dropped to the floor and pulled out the boxes, checking behind everything. No one. Nothing. But I knew he had been there. He had touched the window. Maybe more. I sat on the floor, gripping the lamp like a lifeline, trying to control my breathing. And that's when I heard it. A noise. Soft. Small. Almost electronic. I turned toward my desk and saw my phone. The screen was on. Recording. Only. I hadn't pressed record. I crawled over and picked it up with shaking hands. The timestamp said it had been recording for almost 11 minutes. I hadn't even been home that long. I opened the video. At first, it was just static. A blurry shot of my desk, recorded from what looked like beneath it. But then, the frame shifted. The phone moved. Someone was holding it. And I could see the faint outline of my room. The camera slowly panned, toward the bed, then the window, then the closet. I watched, frozen, as the person holding the phone whispered something. Too quiet to make out. Then the video cut off. I dropped the phone. I felt sick. He had been here while I was gone. Recording. Exploring. Holding my phone. Watching. I didn't hear the door open, but suddenly, I wasn't sure I was alone anymore. I froze. The silence in the apartment was so complete it felt unnatural, thick, suffocating, like the air itself was pressing against my skin. My eyes scanned the room, wide and unblinking, ears straining for any sound. I reached down, grabbing the phone off the floor with a shaking hand. The screen had gone dark again, as if nothing had happened. No proof, no warning. I rose slowly, not taking my eyes off the doorway. I couldn't explain it, but I felt them, like the air had shifted somehow, like a sixth sense that had kicked in purely out of survival. I backed toward the kitchen. I remembered I had a paring knife in the drawer, not much, but it was better than a lamp. As I passed the hallway mirror, I caught a flash of movement behind me. I spun, knife drawer forgotten. Nothing. But when I turned back, there was a new note on the counter. It hadn't been there 5 seconds earlier. I stared at it. My skin went cold. It was folded neatly, perfectly, like all the others. My name was written on the outside. I didn't want to open it. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely peel the paper apart. Inside, only 6 words, written in the same jagged scrawl as before. I'm inside. Please don't scream. I dropped it. Every instinct in me screamed run. I bolted for the front door. But I barely made it 3 steps before I heard it, the closet door creaking open behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel him. Every hair on my body stood up. My breath caught in my throat. And then a voice. Soft. Calm. Way too close. I didn't want it to be like this. I ran. I don't even remember unlocking the door. I just remember sprinting down the hallway barefoot, adrenaline flooding my system, my legs moving on instinct. I didn't stop running until I was outside, on the street, screaming. Neighbors opened their windows. Lights came on. Someone shouted my name. And behind me, from the second-floor window, he was watching, just standing there, expressionless, and holding my phone. He didn't move, just stood there, completely still, in my window. My window, holding my phone like it belonged to him. Like he was showing it to me, one last message in his silent game. And I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. My legs were shaking, my vision blurry from the panic. People were starting to come out of their apartments. A neighbor across the street yelled my name again, asking what was going on. I couldn't answer. I just pointed up at the window. When they looked, he was gone. Just like that. No footsteps, no sound, no trace. By the time anyone else ran up to check my place, he had vanished. The closet door was wide open. The note was still there on the counter. But everything else? My phone, the smudges, the fingerprint on the window, all gone. Even the video I had saved was no longer in my storage. He had deleted everything. Like he was erasing his existence. Like he had never been there. But I know he was. And so does Nina. She found the second note a week later. It had been taped inside the dryer in the shared laundry room downstairs. She screams louder when no one's watching. I haven't stayed alone since. I've moved twice. Changed numbers. Deleted all my social media. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'll get a strange notification on my phone. An app one didn't install. A blank message from a number with no name. And when I check my front door in the morning, I swear I can smell his cologne. Story 2. By Nico. When I first moved into my apartment, I was just happy to finally be living alone. I had spent the past few years bouncing between roommates. Some were fine, most were messy, loud, or just exhausting to be around. The idea of having my own space, no shared dishes or passive-aggressive post-it notes, was like breathing clean air for the first time. The building wasn't luxurious, but it was decent. A small, 3-story place on a quiet residential street. My unit was on the 2nd floor. I had a small balcony, creaky wood floors, and just enough space for my bookshelves, my plants, and my peace. The guy upstairs moved in about a month after me. I didn't meet him right away, just heard the thud of boxes being carried up, muffled footsteps, the occasional dragging sound of furniture, the usual moving in noises. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I kept to myself, and so did he. That was fine. I never even caught his name. But over time, I started to notice things. Late at night, usually around 2 or 3 a.m., I'd hear footsteps above me. Not just pacing, but following. If I walked from my kitchen to the bathroom, there'd be a delay, and then I'd hear him walking, step for step, directly overhead. At first, I brushed it off. Thin floors. Coincidence. We were just living on similar schedules. But it kept happening. If I walked into the hallway, he did too. If I stopped, he stopped. One night, I turned off the lights and walked from one end of the apartment to the other just to test it. And I swear, I could hear him mirroring me. It made my skin crawl. Still, I didn't want to overthink it. Maybe he was just a night owl. Maybe he was pacing because of anxiety or insomnia. I tried to be empathetic, but then things escalated. I started to find things off. My shoes would be slightly moved from where I left them by the door. Not obviously, just barely. enough to make me question myself. The toilet seat was up once, even though I always put it down. My bedroom window, always locked, was found unlatched one morning. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things, that I needed more sleep, but I couldn't shake it. Then I found the footprint. It was on my bathroom floor. Faint, slightly smudged, but clearly a bare footprint. I hadn't showered yet that day. I hadn't walked in there barefoot, and it was bigger than my foot. I stood frozen in the hallway, staring at it, every nerve in my body buzzing. Someone had been in my apartment. I changed my locks the next day. Didn't tell the landlord. Didn't tell anyone. Just went to the hardware store, bought a new set, and installed them myself. For a few nights, things were quiet. Then the drilling sounds started. At first, they were faint, like someone was putting up shelves, but always late, past midnight, sometimes as late as 4 a.m. Short, controlled bursts. Then silence. I knocked on the ceiling once, just to let him know I could hear. The drilling stopped for a full week. Then it came back, louder this time, more erratic. Sometimes it sounded like it was coming from right above my bed. I started sleeping on the couch. That's when I began to hear him talking. Not loud enough to understand, but deep, quiet muttering. Long conversations with no pauses. No laughter. No other voices. Just him, whispering for hours. I'd press my ear to the ceiling, straining to catch a word, but it never made sense. Just noise. And then, one morning, I found something tucked under my front door. Not a note. Not a package. A screw. One small, silver screw. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't make sense. Was it meant to mean something? Had it fallen? But then the next morning, there was another. And the next. Every day for a week, a single screw, left right outside my door. I started to check my ceiling for holes. For cameras. I even unscrewed the ceiling light fixture in my bedroom, just to be sure. Nothing. But the screws kept coming. And then they stopped. Just like that. Instead, I started hearing scraping. Like furniture being dragged slowly. But not in the apartment. In the walls. I'd put my hand against the drywall and feel a faint vibration, like something shifting just out of reach. I began losing sleep. My eating habits got worse. I was tired, anxious, wired all the time. I started skipping work, calling in sick just to stay home and listen. I needed proof. I bought a cheap sound recorder and hid it in the vent near the ceiling. Let it run overnight. The next morning, I listened to it. Hours of ambient noise. Humming. My fridge. Then, around 3:17 a.m. Footsteps. A slow creak. And a voice. Muffled, but clear enough. He knows. Another pause. Then, I think he changed the locks. I stopped breathing. I replayed it a dozen times, headphones pressed tight against my ears. There was no mistaking it. He had been in my apartment. And now, he couldn't get back in. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to tell anyone. What would I even say? That my upstairs neighbor was whispering in the walls. I stopped sleeping entirely. I moved my mattress into the living room, blocked the bedroom door with a chair, but I still heard him. And now, it was different. Now he was directly above me. Always above me. Wherever I moved in the apartment, I'd hear the creaking above. Following. Waiting. And last night, I heard him at the front door. Not knocking. Just standing there. I saw his shadow move under the doorframe. He stayed there for almost 30 minutes. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat on the floor with the lights off, gripping a kitchen knife, waiting for him to leave. And when he did, I found something else slipped under the door. This time, it wasn't a screw. It was a key. My key. The one I replaced weeks ago. And on the tape I recorded after that, one phrase repeated itself over and over, like a mantra. You're still mine. You're still mine. You're still mine. He hasn't knocked. He hasn't said anything since. But I don't think he has to anymore. I think now, he's waiting for me to react. I haven't slept in 2 nights. Every time I close my eyes, I see the key. I keep it locked in a drawer now, but it doesn't matter. I know he has others. That wasn't a message. It was a reminder. A way of telling me he's already been here, and he can come back whenever he wants. The apartment doesn't feel like mine anymore. It feels like a set, like every wall might be listening, like the ceiling might crack open and spill him down into my life. He's quiet now. No more pacing. No more screws. No more late-night whispers. But I know he's there, because I still hear shifting. Not above me this time. Below. Under the floorboards. Under me. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that I was losing it from the stress. But I've tested it, putting a glass of water on the floor, watching it ripple ever so slightly when I feel the vibrations. They're real, and they're getting closer to the center of the apartment. It's like he's moving through the walls, through hidden crawl spaces, places I didn't even know existed in this old building. And last night, I found something I can't explain. I woke up, if you can call it that, around 4 a.m., curled up on the couch, lights still on. I had dozed off without meaning to, exhaustion finally dragging me under. I went to splash cold water on my face. When I opened the bathroom mirror cabinet to grab a towel, I saw it. A camera lens. No bigger than a screw head. Hidden behind a line of shampoo bottles, drilled directly into the back of the cabinet. Facing out. Facing me. I stepped back, heart pounding so hard I thought I might faint. My reflection in the mirror stared back, pale and shaking. He had been watching me. In the bathroom. The most private place in my life wasn't even mine anymore. I didn't touch the camera. I couldn't. Instead, I walked out of the bathroom slowly, like if I moved too fast, something might react, might answer. I wanted to run, pack a bag and leave. But I didn't, because something in me said that the second I tried to leave, he'd know. And something tells me, that's exactly what he's waiting for. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the hallway like it might move on its own. I didn't even turn the lights off. I wanted him to know I was awake, that I wasn't going to play dead anymore. But I also didn't move, because the truth was, I didn't know how to fight someone who lived in the ceilings, in the walls, in the space behind mirrors. I tried to act normal the next morning, got dressed, ate a dry piece of toast, pretended to leave for work. But instead of going to the bus stop, I hid in the stairwell, quiet, listening, and I heard it. The sound of a door creaking open, upstairs. Then, slow footsteps above my apartment. Then silence. I waited, maybe 15 minutes. Then I crept back up, unlocked the door as silently as I could, and stepped inside. At first, nothing seemed different. But then I walked into the bathroom. The mirror cabinet was open, and the camera was gone. In its place was a new note. No envelope. Just a torn scrap of paper, taped to the glass. 7 words. Don't look for me. You'll lose. That was the first time I cried. Really cried. Not from fear, though there was plenty of that, but from the certainty that this wasn't over, that this was never going to be over. I didn't call anyone, didn't go to work. I packed a single backpack, left most of my things behind. I didn't care. I just walked out and never went back. I found a sublet on the other side of the city. No one knows where I am, not even my friends. I don't post online. I keep my curtains shut. I don't tell strangers my name. But even now, sometimes I still hear it. That scraping, like furniture being dragged somewhere just above me. The hollow tap of something inside the walls. And once, last week, I found a screw on my windowsill. Just one. Perfectly centered. Shiny. Brand new. Waiting. Story 3. By Lena. I never thought being visible would make me feel so vulnerable. When I started sharing content online, it was supposed to be harmless. I ran a small lifestyle account. Nothing dramatic. Outfit ideas, morning routines, healthy meal preps, aesthetic bookshelf setups. That kind of thing. It wasn't about going viral. I just liked the creative process, and over time, a small following grew. At first, it was flattering. People would message me asking where I got my coat, or how I managed to organize my fridge so neatly. I started getting recognized occasionally at coffee shops, on the train, even once at the gym. Always in passing. Always polite. But then came the first comment that felt different. It wasn't rude. It wasn't creepy, at least not obviously. It just said, "You looked sad today. I hope you're okay." I hadn't posted a video that day. Just a photo of a smoothie and a snapshot of my living room. I read the comment 3 times, trying to figure out what they meant. Maybe they were referring to an older post? Or maybe it was just a weird attempt at kindness. I ignored it. But a few days later, they commented again. "You should close your blinds when you eat. The sun makes you squint." That one stopped me cold. Because I had, in fact, eaten lunch on the couch that day, with the blinds open, and I did remember squinting. I hadn't posted about it. I hadn't shared anything from that angle. There was no way this person could have known that, unless they were watching me. I clicked on the profile. The name was just numbers. No profile picture. No posts. No followers. Just the username and the comments. I blocked them immediately, but the next day, a new account followed me. Same pattern. No profile picture. No posts. Same long string of numbers. They didn't comment at first. They just liked a few old photos. Then they sent a message. I liked the blue sweater better than the white one. I hadn't posted either outfit. I stared at the message for so long that the app timed out and logged me out. I didn't respond. I blocked that account too. But the pattern started. Every time I blocked them, another would pop up. Always blank. Always silent for a while, then a short, specific message. Never threatening. Never violent. Just detailed. Too detailed. They'd mentioned the grocery store I'd gone to without me posting it. The shoes I wore at the park. The name of a song I hummed while walking home when I didn't even have earbuds in. I stopped going live. I stopped posting in real time. I scrubbed my content of street names, storefronts, reflections, and mirrors. But the messages kept coming. The new shampoo smells better. You should keep your keys in a different pocket. The coffee place near your gym switched brands. You didn't notice. It got into my head. I started thinking about them constantly, wondering where they were, if they were watching from a distance or standing behind me in a line. Every crowd felt like a threat, every stranger a possibility. I told a friend about it once, just lightly, over drinks. She laughed. "You've got a secret admirer." Kinda romantic in a creepy way. I forced a smile, but I wanted to throw up. It wasn't romantic. It felt like being haunted by someone who didn't need to exist to make me scared. Things escalated the night I found something in my mailbox. Not a letter, not even an envelope, just a photo. A printed photo of me standing in my bedroom, brushing my hair in front of the mirror. The lights were off except for the glow of the lamp on my dresser. I remember that night. I had just gotten back from a date. I was thinking about whether to text the guy again. The photo was taken from outside the window. I live on the 3rd floor. I dropped it. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't even pick it back up at first. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stood there in the hallway, frozen, as if moving would make him appear. When I finally got back into my apartment, I closed every curtain, turned off every light, and sat in the bathroom with the fan on. I stayed there for over an hour, knees pressed to my chest. He had been there, outside, watching, close enough to photograph me, to know what I was doing, and I never even noticed. I started carrying pepper spray. I changed the lock. I bought a second lock and installed it myself. I added a camera to my door, one of those motion-sensing ones. And still, I never saw him. The accounts kept coming. And then, one day, everything stopped. No messages, no new followers, no creepy comments. For a whole week. At first, I felt relief. I thought maybe he'd lost interest, moved on to someone else. Maybe all the silence was finally enough to make him bored. But then, I found something on my bed. I had been out all afternoon, running errands. When I came back, everything looked normal, door locked, nothing out of place. Except for a single item resting on my duvet, my favorite lip balm. The one I kept in the front pocket of my gym bag, which I hadn't taken out that day. It wasn't just that he had been inside my apartment. It was that he knew what mattered to me, what would unnerve me most. He didn't take anything. He didn't break anything. He didn't leave a note. Just a small object, like a calling card, like a promise. I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents. I didn't want them to look at me like I was crazy, or worse, like I was making it up. I didn't want the conversation to turn into, well, maybe if you didn't post so much online. So I said nothing, but I changed. I stopped sleeping in my bed. I started leaving music on all night, just so I wouldn't hear the silence. I kept the lights on. I showered with the door open. I taped over the webcam on my laptop, my phone. I moved my dresser in front of the window. And one morning, I found the lip balm gone again. That was when I realized he wasn't coming in to scare me. He was coming in to remind me that he could. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing recorded on the door camera. But he was there. Maybe through the fire escape. Maybe through the roof. Maybe through the basement. I tried to catch him. I stayed up for nights, waiting in silence, pretending to sleep. But he never came when I expected him to. He always came when I finally let my guard down. And then, just 3 days ago, something changed. I got a message. Not on social media. On my phone. A number I didn't recognize. No name. Just a single message. "You were going to wear the black dress tonight. Why did you change your mind?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't posted. I hadn't even taken a photo. I had stood in front of my closet for maybe 5 minutes before choosing something else. He was in my apartment, watching. I haven't changed clothes since. I haven't showered. I've barely eaten. I keep thinking that if I don't move, if I don't do anything he can comment on, maybe he'll disappear. But I know that's not how this works. He doesn't need content. He just needs me. Quiet. Still. Compliant. And tonight, before writing this, I opened my fridge to grab a bottle of water. And taped to the inside wall, behind the milk, was another photo. It was me, asleep on the couch, from above, like it had been taken from the ceiling. I looked up and saw the air vent, slightly askew. And for the first time in my life, I really understood what it meant to feel like a thing, not a person. Like I'd become property in someone else's obsession. And he's still watching. I know he is. I just don't know how long I can pretend I don't see him. I didn't sleep at all that night. I didn't even lie down. I sat on the floor in the corner of my living room, lights on, phone in my hand, staring at that vent. Every creak in the ceiling made my heart seize. Every gust of air felt too cold, too directed, like a breath. By morning, I was shaking. From exhaustion. From fear. From the realization that this is what he wants, me weak, paranoid, isolated. I unscrewed the vent cover. My hands were trembling so badly I dropped the screwdriver twice. Inside, it looked empty. Just dust and shadows. But the cover, the metal was bent slightly, like someone had pried it off with their hands. There was no camera. No wires. Just the knowledge that someone had been up there, or maybe still was. I stood on a chair and pressed my ear to the opening. Nothing. But that didn't mean anything anymore. I cleaned up the photo from the fridge and shoved it in a drawer with the others. There were 6 now. I hadn't thrown any of them away. I think part of me hoped they'd stop if I kept them. That if I treated them like evidence, like warnings, he wouldn't need to escalate. But deep down, I knew better. The next day, I went to a cafe across town, one I'd never been to, hadn't posted about, far from my usual spots. I sat by the window, trying to calm down, trying to think. Just before leaving, I checked my phone. New message. Unknown number. You don't like almond milk. Stick to oat. I stared at the screen, my stomach folding in on itself. I hadn't posted what I ordered. I hadn't spoken to the cashier. I had paid through the app. He had been there. I looked around the cafe, I sweeping over everyone. Students with laptops, a couple having breakfast, a guy with headphones scrolling on his phone. Anyone could be him. Or worse, none of them. Maybe he was just outside, watching through the glass, always behind, just out of reach. I left immediately, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I walked aimlessly for hours, through unfamiliar streets, changing directions randomly, trying to lose the phantom that I couldn't see but couldn't shake. Eventually, as the sun began to set, I found myself standing outside my own building again, and taped to the front door, so casually, so publicly, was an envelope. My name, written in neat block letters. Inside, no message. Just a photo. Me, earlier that day, sitting at the cafe, looking at my phone, and behind me, reflected in the window, a figure in a hoodie, face obscured, looking directly at me. I don't remember walking up the stairs. I barely remember unlocking the door. I just remember the way my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the key twice, and how even the weight of the envelope in my pocket felt like it might tear through my coat. When I stepped into the apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. Something in me couldn't. Not out of fear, though there was plenty of that, but because I didn't want to see. Not if he'd moved something. Not if there was another photo waiting. Not if I'd noticed something that would confirm what I already knew deep down, that I was never alone, and hadn't been for a long time. I sat in the living room, phone in hand, knees to my chest, just breathing, listening, trying to think. No sounds, no creaks, no messages, just that awful silence. The kind that only feels this loud when someone else is choosing not to speak. I stayed like that for maybe an hour, maybe more. Time got weird, stretched, and then I heard something. Not loud, not obvious, just a shift. The sound of fabric brushing against fabric. From behind the wall behind my bookshelf. I froze. My body locked up, as if every cell had suddenly remembered what terror actually feels like. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. And then a breath. Not mine. Long, slow, measured, coming from inside the wall. I stood up as quietly as I could, took one step backward, then another. The floor creaked beneath me, and the breath stopped. Silence again. Not gone, waiting. I backed into the kitchen, hands shaking uncontrollably. I grabbed the only thing within reach, a heavy ceramic mug. Stupid, but it was all I had. I didn't speak. I didn't scream. And then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in weeks. The crawl space. There was a narrow access panel in the hallway closet. Maintenance had shown it to me when I moved in. Said it connected some of the upper ventilation paths, nothing important. Just old bones of the building. I'd never opened it. But what if he had? I ran to the closet, heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled everything out, jackets, shoes, boxes, until I could see the panel. It was shut, but the screws were loose, barely hanging on. I reached up, and with almost no effort, pulled the panel open. The smell hit first. Dust, sweat, old fabric, something faintly metallic. I lifted my phone and turned on the flashlight, and I saw it. The nest, blankets, empty food wrappers, water bottles, my missing scarf, one of my hair ties, a notepad filled with handwriting I didn't recognize, and a phone, my old phone, the one I lost 6 months ago and thought I'd dropped in an Uber. I stared into that space, unable to move. He had been living there, literally inside my apartment, inside the walls, inside my life. I backed away. My mind couldn't process it all at once. But as I turned, something on the notepad caught my eye. My name, over and over again, hundreds of times. Sometimes with hearts, sometimes with dates, sometimes next to phrases like, "when she finally sees me." That's when it hit me. He wasn't just watching. He thought we were already together, that I was playing a game, that I was leading him to something, that every post, every photo, every outfit was a message for him. I slammed the panel shut. I didn't go back to the living room. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't even take my phone charger. I walked out the front door, and I didn't lock it, because I knew it wasn't my apartment anymore. It was his. It probably always had been.